Hey everybody, welcome out. We'll get started in just a few minutes here.
Hey Chad, how's it going, man?
Good, Nick. How you doing?
I am good. I've had a much longer start to the day than you have. So from East Coast to West Coast. But yeah, excited to be here.
Yeah, me too, man. This is like a North American webinar, like Canada and United States joining hands.
Yes, we got someone from London. That's awesome. Very
Oh,
different time as
yes.
well. Hi there. Hey Rob, how's it going? Can you guys see Chad's screen okay? Just checking. Awesome. Thank you so much, Kent. That's awesome. We've got someone from the Shetland Islands tuning in too, which is awesome.
Dang.
It's it's so great, just like how, uh, you know, with the current state of affairs, though, like how webinars can really bring everyone together. I just love it.
All these
You
cool
know?
places. That's
Yeah.
amazing. And also probably like crazy inconvenient time zones. You know, people probably like want to get to sleep and like they're staying up for this, which no pressure to deliver a great webinar, but you know.
Yeah. Pressure is all on your back, man. No, I'm just kidding. Germany's here too. Hi, Patrick. That's awesome.
Germany.
That's great. 6 p.m. That's in the UK. Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, so that's 6 hours ahead of Toronto or Eastern Standard Time, where I'm in.
Whew.
Oh, and then 9 hours from you. Wow.
Wow, yeah.
And 5 p.m. Need coffee for Simon. Oh, I hear you. Um, it's 12 p.m. I also need coffee, or my second refill of coffee, as I should say. And Chad, do you drink coffee, or is this your? Are you on your first yet?
No, I'm not like a coffee guy. I'm like I feel like I'm kind of like spazzy enough as it is that I'm kind of like doing the world a service by not getting into coffee. Like I'm just like
Gotcha.
decaffeinated me is like hyper and spazzy enough. So like I'm just I'm bowing out of caffeine.
No need for too much coffee.
Yeah, I come pre-caffeinated as a human being.
I might have to take a note from your playbook there. We'll see how this presentation goes in the second part of how fast I talk.
Um, all right, dude. So should we kick it off officially? I mean, it's 8:15. It's 9 now. It's now officially 9. So I guess we can officially kick it off. Welcome to the webinar, everybody, an international audience of amazingly wonderful people. And I'm Chad Perkins. I'm here with Nick Harauz, who is like a master trainer in Toronto. I'm in Seattle. And we're going to be talking about some fun stuff. I'll introduce that in just a second. We want to cover a few things. This is part of a series of webinars every Monday this month on compositing. Officially, it's demystifying post-production, MoGraph, and VFX workflows. And so you can see on this, this web address here, previous webinars that we've done, and you could watch those, and as well as the topics for this month and next month as well, which is going to dig into MoGraph and looks, I don't know, pretty sexy. I plan on going to those actually. And then also there's this YouTube channel, the Maxon Volume Program Training channel. And when this webinar is done, it's being recorded and will be posted here. So this is last week's, for example. So I believe that's all the housekeeping. Am I getting everything correct there, Nick? Am I missing anything?
Yeah, no, I think that's about it. And yeah, it's part of that webinar series, and we're in week 3 of 5. There's like an extra one this month, I think, because there's 5 weeks this month. So pretty exciting to kind of dive into this a little bit more thoroughly when we talk about compositing and the VFX Suite.
Yeah. So this week we're going to be introducing the idea of render passes, and we're going to be talking about a couple different ways to use render passes and composite them in After Effects. And that's kind of going to be like the rest of the month is going to be building on this idea. So we're going to start very simple, very basic. I'm going to introduce the concept of render passes, why you'd want to use them, and then we'll be building on that again the rest of today and also the rest of the month. So I have here, I'm going to start with the problem, and then we'll get into render passes. So I have a clip of something rendered out from Cinema 4D and After Effects. And actually, this is kind of cheating a little bit because I actually went through and added some post stuff in After Effects as well. I added the glow to the triangle with Optical Glow, and I added the smoke with particular. And so that's that's what we have. But in looking at this, I realized, especially after doing the post work in After Effects, that I really want to change this scene a little bit. Like these reflections on the water, like I initially made them kind of bright so that it would provide contrast and guide your eye to these dudes here that are touching this triangle, space dudes. And but then once I lit up the triangle, I realized that these really bright areas kind of pull focus away from the triangle. And also when I added the optical glow to this triangle, I'm realizing that now that I'm really missing the any kind of like pink here. Like there's like the reflection here, but if this were like a bright triangle like it looks like it is, and it's like creating this light, there would be some kind of like pink light here. So I want to adjust the reflections, like all the reflective surfaces, but that's very difficult to do in After Effects. I mean, I have like some compositing tricks. I could do like a Luma key or whatever, but there's a lot of reflective surfaces that aren't always super bright, and so it creates a challenge. So what I can do, and this is what the subject of today is I can render out what's called a render pass from Cinema 4D, and we'll be talking about how to do that. And this is a render pass of just the reflections. So when I spit this out from Cinema 4D, then I have just this object. And then I could build on this and fiddle with it further. For example, I mean, this is just one way to do this. There's a lot of stuff that you could do here, but I could use the set matte effect and then use, for the matte, I could use the luminance. And let me just solo that layer really quick. So now this is what that layer is. So I have on a separate layer just the reflection. And so then I could edit this just the reflections. For example, I could apply curves. And then now I can go in, as we talked about a couple weeks ago in this webinar series, I can dim this, darken this down. And so then I can adjust just the reflective areas. You can see that the space dudes, the mountains, sky, none of that's being affected, only the reflective surfaces, because I have that as a separate pass. So there's all kinds of separate passes that you can create, all different types of separate passes. You can create luminant materials and have that be a separate pass. Ambient occlusion can be a separate pass, shadows and highlights, all different kinds of things you can have separated so that when you're compositing here, you have the ultimate control. And we'll talk about using Super Comp at the end of the month. And again, these tools all put together really form a great compositing arsenal. This is an example that I took a little bit more time with. And I have the reflection pass that I dimmed a little bit and also color graded slightly and also kind of blurred a little bit. So it was a little bit softer and foggier. And then I created another version that was pink and then masked it off. And so now I kind of have this kind of pink glow. And again, because it's a separate render pass, I can just like dial down the opacity. I have total control over how I want to affect just the reflections. And that's pretty great. So let me show you how to do that in Cinema 4D really quick. So I'm in Cinema 4D and here's that scene, and I could go into my render settings, and then I click this multi-pass button. And then here are all the different passes that we can create, all the different things we could render out separately. So we could render out, yeah, right? So many. Also, albedo, like I don't even know if it's pronounced like albedo or albedo or whatever. I had never heard of this. I looked it up, and it's rendering a texture without any highlight or shadow. And this is actually like I thought this would be like a legacy thing because I'd never heard it mentioned before. I thought it'd be like a legacy thing, but no, it's like an up and coming, like really great way to render out textures without highlights and shadows. I didn't know that. Motion vectors, I mean, all kinds of really interesting things you can render out just by themselves. You have that data isolated, and After Effects actually has some pretty great tools to be able to use most, if not all, of this data when you're doing composites. So when you add something from the multipass section here, it shows up in this multipass area here, and you could turn it on and off with the check mark and set some settings sometimes with them, and then you could render them out separately. This does add a little bit to the render time, but I'm going to show you some ways around that. So one of the benefits of when you're using After Effects and Cinema 4D together is that there are a couple really great ways to combine them. Two methods. One is Cineware, and one is an older workflow that actually I think is a little bit more stable and reliable and more helpful for professional workflows, and Nick is going to cover that, so I'm not going to step on his toes. But I want to look at Cineware a little bit. Now, Cineware is, again, the new kid on the block. Like, Cineware is a relatively new tool, and a lot of resources are going into making it better. And so a lot of users that are trying to learn Cineware mistakenly feel that this is kind of how you should use Cinema 4D files in After Effects. And that's not really the case. I don't, at least not yet. Maybe it will be in the future. But what I can do here to get Cineware going, I could just import, I'm just going to go to here, and I'm just going to import a Cinema 4D file into After Effects. So I just import it. And also waiting. Waiting is another important step in bringing this in. And also I realized too that this file is kind of like a catch-22 for a demo, because it's like more complex. There's a lot more going on, but at the same time, it takes a while to load. Sorry, what were you gonna say, Nick?
Well, while this is loading, it reminds me of something, and this is kind of my own experience in getting familiar with Premiere and After Effects workflows. So probably 10, I don't know how many years ago, but around 10 years ago, dynamic linking was introduced between Premiere and After Effects, where you can literally select a video clip and you can send it over to After Effects and it will open up an After Effects composition. The problem is, while you're like reading that in your Premiere Pro timeline, is that every single time that you play back that file, it's kind of like depending on After Effects in order to produce that. And this is a kind of a similar workflow with Cineware, would you say? It's sort of like bringing in a Cinema 4D file, and you're asking to use Cinema 4D's resources inside of After Effects, and it has some speed, problems, or let's call it some speed bumps that could occur along the way, especially with like a heavy file like this. However, with that said, it does introduce some new interesting workflows for certain projects, and with that said, speaking specifically about Red Giant products and particular, which we're not covering, you can now bring in a Cinema 4D file and use that with particular form and mirror. So having that advantage in some cases, I think, could be advantageous. So I would say you want to keep in mind potentially the speed hit that might occur with a Cinema 4D workflow. And I just wanted to draw that comparison to Premiere. So sorry for interrupting, Chad.
No, that's great. I mean, that's a brilliant analogy, Nick. I mean, that's a really, really great analogy, because I think the same thing. I'm just going to bring this Cinema 4D here, because it loads. It takes a second to load when I put it in a new comp. I'm just going to drag and drop it to a new comp icon to make a new composition with this scene, and then we're going to like wait for this to load real quick. But yeah, in both instances with, okay, it's loaded already, I guess. Bark is worse than its bite. But in both instances with Cineware and with Dynamic Link, they're kind of presented to audiences as kind of like, finally, the integration you've always been waiting for, and this is the solution. This is the Messiah. This is the the be-all end-all solution for combining these two apps. And it's not really like that. And the examples they show off are on like a really, really robust computers, and they're very simple. And so it seems like it's going to be this like, this savior that just fixes all of our problems. And it's not really. So then what happens is that a lot of users that are more professional and have like more advanced workflows will try it, and they'll be like, oh no, this is stupid, this doesn't work. And then they'll give up on it. But just like with Dynamic Link, there are ways to use it like wisely where it really, really helps, but you just can't use it in the standard way, like the demos show that you should use it. And same thing here with Cineware. Like, you don't want to use this for like, especially if you like have more advanced Cinema 4D workflows, you don't want to use Cineware for like a Dynamic Link thing. It will slow things down, but that doesn't mean that there aren't great tools in here that can help your workflow. And like, that's kind of like my goal for the next few minutes, is to like pass that on. So a few things really quick that's really interesting here. I just switched to PC from Mac. Been a Mac guy for like 15 years. And so I just switched to PC. And what's really interesting is that these options in the renderer dropdown are different on different platforms. So On Mac, for example, there's like OpenGL and Draft and Final, and then here there's Current and Current Draft and Viewport Draft, which is interesting. So there's not parity, which surprised me. So the current ones give us a little bit more options. You'll notice if I choose one of the viewport options, then I can't use Cinema 4D multipass. That's not here. But if I choose one of the current options, then I do have Cinema 4D multipass. So then what I can do is I can enable multipass, choose set multipass, and then I could choose a multipass from this dropdown. So then I could choose reflection, for example, and click OK. And usually that will take a bit to update. I don't know if you can hear my PC fans, they're going insane. But look, we have the reflection pass like right here. Now, so the benefit of this is that, you know, sometimes renders can take forever, right? Like if you're doing a Cinema 4D render, like this might take days or something like that to create a really high quality final render. And it did take a little bit, it took a few seconds, but we got this reflection pass from Cinema 4D live with Cineware without doing a render first. This is a live preview of the reflection pass. And like, that's not something that you've ever been able to do before. So being able to like go and preview object buffers and all these different types of passes that we're going to look at a little bit, like is tremendous to be able to go and look at this stuff. We could look at illumination. I don't think this is actually going to work very well. Oh, no, there it is. So I actually didn't render out an illumination pass, but here's the illumination pass. So like we could see the light hitting this. So we have kind of like highlights and shadows and whatnot. So we can change the multipass right here live, and that allows us to begin the composite. And we can even hand it off to somebody else and they can begin the composite and start working on it before the renders even started, which is a really big benefit. Let me show you, I have a couple more minutes. Let me just show you a couple other things in Cineware that's really helpful. I'm going to go to my triangle here. And if you haven't used layers before, layers are a phenomenal tool in Cinema 4D for organizing things. So what I can do is I can take my triangle shrine here, and I can drag and drop this to the triangle layer that I've created, or I can right click and go to add to layer or add to a new layer if I want to do that, or I could just left click on this little square and add to a layer or add to a new layer. One of the tricks that frustrated me a lot with this is that like I would drag, like say the sweep object, this is my triangle. So if I turn it on and off, there's like my whole triangle. And so I would drag and drop this to a new layer, and then it would drive me crazy because it doesn't bring the actual stuff that I want. It just brings the sweep object. But then if I solo this triangle layer, it takes away everything on the screen because it really only brought the sweep object and not the circle and the triangle. And that's maddening to me. But if you middle mouse click, it will select everything. And then if you drag this in, it will take the parent and then all the children and add them to the layer at once. And that is a gosh send. That's amazing. So all these things are now on this layer. So what I can do is come down here and I have all these options. I could take it out of the hierarchy for animation, and I could solo it. So I'm looking at just that layer. It's really tremendous. So now if I save this Cinema 4D file and go back into After Effects, I think that this works. I think it's going to update and be okay here. But I can choose Cinema 4D layers and then set the layers, and I could choose which layers I want to see. And by default, what's really cool is if you use any layers, it automatically creates this items not on layers layer for you. So then you can turn off all the items on layers or view just the items that are not on layers or what have you. But if I want to see just the triangle, I click OK, and there's my triangle. And I'll turn off multipass so I get the pink or whatever. So then what I can do is I can start playing around with this. I can go in and add Optical Glow, which is a favorite effect. And I can start playing around with this and start doing the composites again, right away without doing any rendering, because I can isolate stuff with layers, which is really helpful. Let's see here.
Chad,
Yes, do it.
with the layers, like selecting the layers and using Cineware, are you ever using a workflow where you're combining the same Cineware file and then identifying the layers? I'm just curious about that with Cineware, if you follow what I'm saying. So
I
let's just
don't
say,
think I understand what you're saying.
so you have the Cinema 4D file, right? And the Cineware is on there, and you've identified the triangle. Do you ever duplicate the actual Cinema 4D file in your composition and then set a layer to something else and do your passes that way? Or are you just
Oh,
using it for
yes.
previewing purposes?
Thank you. Yes. Yeah, totally. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm so sorry that I did not demonstrate that, because that's where the magic happens. So like duplicating this layer and then having like the reflection pass on this layer, and then duplicating this one and having an object buffer or whatever, and then having these objects isolated. I mean, that's a huge saving grace to be able to duplicating the Cinema 4D files is where it's at. By the way, another trick that really drove me crazy is, let's say I wanted to like move this for some reason. If I move this, then the glow is applied to the warning. I love that. But it says, the layer size must match composition and use default transform value. So it's basically saying you can't transform it, buddy. Sorry, you can't add any transforms. But what you can do is actually add the transform effect, which is an old effect in After Effects, and then this will allow you to create transforms. You could move, scale, rotate, all that kind of stuff, which is really helpful. So you can kind of work around Cineware's limitations through little hacks like this, which is kind of fun. Okay, just one more little quick trick. If we add an external compositing tag, or excuse me, this is just a regular compositing tag. I could go to tags. I gotta select an object first. Tags, and then go to render tags and apply a compositing tag. And then I can go to the object buffer, and I could choose an object buffer, which is essentially an alpha channel for the selected object. And it's kind of a frustrating thing for me. I don't know of any way to rename these. As far as I know, you can just number them, and like that's all you get. So you have to do a really good job of keeping track of what's on which object buffer. But basically I set this up so that these guys would each have an object buffer, and the triangle would have an object buffer. And then if I bring this over into Cineware, then that's another thing that I can do here. I'll turn off set layers so that I'll see all my stuff. And then I'll probably actually turn off Optical Glow as well. Give that a second to refresh. See, like this is why you don't want to use this in like a, production workflow, but go ahead.
What type of computer are you running? Just I know you were saying that you just switched to a PC, but I'm just curious the
specs.
setting. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have like I think it's an i9 whatever. I don't know. I'm not a CPU guy. It's a new like i9 something. And then 64 gigs of RAM and a 2080 Ti graphics card.
Okay.
So. And also I should say too, I'm a huge fan of Mac. I know a lot of people say that like, oh, platform doesn't matter, blah, blah, blah. I'm actually a huge Mac fan, and I miss it. But my Mac Pro had similar specs and like a very similar graphics card, same amount of RAM, and this thing is like a billion times faster. Like it works with video and 3D files like way better. And I hate to admit that, but that's my reality. So anyways, one of the things I want to say really quick is that in the multipass, we could also use object buffers. And here they're not even numbered in this list. I don't understand. I don't understand that. Like you just have a bunch of object buffers, you got to keep track of it. But I do have this now as a Luma mat where I can isolate this guy, and I could start doing like the composite to this guy before I've even rendered anything. So again, I really feel like this, using it like the dynamic link thing, like Nick mentioned, is not the best solution. Having it be like the be all end all, bring in your Cineware files and this is just how you do Cinema 4D from now on, you do your renders from here. I don't think that's the best workflow in most cases. Maybe with really simple files.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
like
agree. I would say simple files like for the example, like you can bring in a ton of stuff from the content browser to going back to the example of Trapcode particular form, where you might just want to read a 3D object. I think that's a great way of using the Cinema 4D file. But you know,
yes.
with a scene like yours, where you have multiple objects, you know, and are looking to add multiple things to it, it might be more efficient to bake out, or like I like to call it, bake a cake, and start working with those pieces through an AEC workflow, which I'll eventually get into.
Yeah,
But I can do.
why don't you like, I mean, that sounds like a great segue to talking about your
Uh-oh.
thing right now. I mean, like,
It's on.
I mean, it feels like I mean, we've exhausted the Cineware thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, the only thing I just wanted to say about that in closing is that, like, yeah, it's not the be all end all solution, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have value. There's a lot that you can do with it if you're just going to use pieces of it without rendering, and you could start your composite on object buffers, on you know, render passes. You could start those composites right here. You can even bring these into Super Comp and start working things that way to composite these things together. And like Nick said, you use them with Trapcode products as well. And so it does have its value. It's not the ultimate one-stop shop yet. Maybe they'll change. I mean, they're constantly upgrading it, so maybe it will be one day. But for right now, it's really about using a combination of Cineware plus the thing that Nick's about to talk about now.
Awesome. And
Over to
Darren
you.
actually, Darren in the comments actually did bring up a good point, and I'll make sure to share this as well. And that is in Cinema 4D's render settings. When you add the object buffer there from the list of all of the individual passes that you can actually rename the object buffer files there. So that is one way. So when you go there and you double click a name, that is
Yeah.
where you can actually rename the
Oh, I didn't
so
know
this is
that.
so that's something that you can do to kind of help with the organization. And thanks so much for that, Darren, just to mention, and I'll make sure to show that in the
Darren.
render pass.
Oh.
I know I've seen a workflow. I know that this shows up in certain cases, depending on how you're sending things to After Effects. I know though that although I believe if you do rename it and use the extractor plugin, which is one way to read object buffers, that the name won't carry over. But even
Oh,
having
okay.
this in a few of the different workflows that are available can be super helpful. And as mentioned, Chad, yeah, like help you differentiate between the things that you've assigned through the compositing tag.
Yes. Oh, Darren, that's amazing. Somebody get that guy a lunch or like
Yes,
form a religion
definitely. We're
with
have
him
to
as
get
the
Darren
deity.
a lunch. That's awesome. Cool. Let me see if I can you share
Let's
or
see.
change presenter, Chad, and I'll hop over to my
Oh,
screen.
change presenter. Yeah. There we go.
Uh, and I
Yeah,
am
I'm
Nick.
sure I
I'll
want
just
to do
wait.
that.
Here we go. Hold on. Let me just get my Cinema 4D project up, and I'll show my screen and just wait a second. Can everyone see
I see
on
it.
my Cinema 4D project right now? Okay, cool. It's a little dark, but let me hop forward a few frames and just render this out to sort of show you what I would like to send over into After Effects. And we'll break down a couple pieces and also talk about, in my mind, in discovering more and more about multi-pass workflows and you know, doing separate passes, some things that I find handy along the way in terms of how to save these things. Anyways, to explain this, I basically have, as you can see here, Chad and everyone else, two eggs within my scene. And the way that I got these eggs to crack was using something called a Voronoi fracture. And that just allowed me to break these eggs into several pieces, which is always fun, using multiple elements and breaking them. With that also said, I want to draw your attention that there are two materials on each of the Voronoi fracture objects. So one is the exterior shell, and the other one here, Chad, that you can see is the interior shell. And the way that I got the two different types of materials on the Voronoi fracture was under your Voronoi fracture settings. I just want to mention that there is a selections tab down here, and all I did was enable inside faces. What this does is it automatically kind of creates a selection on the object. And if I just show you one of the luminance materials on the sphere, we can actually see under the basic that it's that the actual interior is using the inside faces selection. And all I did was I just dragged that into the material tag. And that just gives me two materials with my Voronoi fracture object. That's important to the story because this material, which is only using the luminance channel, what I really want to do is use After Effects to get some pretty solid glows, and that's using VFX tools. And why I need to do a multi-pass workflows is I would like to have separate control of these glows, right, using Optical Glow. And I also just want to have, a lot more control within After Effects. So here's the initial, a few different things we have to do for the actual setup. And it's just worth mentioning that inside of Cinema 4D, you can right-click an object, and at any time you can add a render tag known as compositing. And inside the compositing tag, which Chad's already showed, there's the object buffer. And it's here where I'm going to take this Voronoi fracture large, and under the object buffer, I'm just going to enable that. And you can see that this is assigned to buffer 1. I then just repeated that step under the render tags, compositing here, and enable this as buffer 2. So I've got, my large fracture here. You can see the compositing tag, buffer 1, buffer 2. And in your multi-pass render settings, there actually happens to be, which Chad taught me, a way of doing a material luminance pass. So we can have a separate pass for both of our luminance channels, and then use the alpha channel pass that we just set up through the object buffer in order to segregate the two different optical glows that will apply to our eggs. Okay, so now that that's set up, let me actually head over here to my render settings, and let's take a look at a few things here under the save menu, which I think are so important. This is a very long file name where I'm targeting saving, which is going to be the baked movie. So this file here is going to be an OpenEXR, which is great for VFX workflows, especially if you're using SuperComp. Really great quality, as well as is going to respect the linear workflow that we've set up. What I want to point out is I actually created, under this area where I'm going to save, I just named the folder in this list here, and it created a folder on my system. But the most important are these little dollar signs that you see here. These are tokens, and tokens will save you so much time. Correct me if I'm wrong, Darren, because I know that I'm here, but I believe they were introduced in R17. And what they do is they allow you to set up naming strategies for your Cinema 4D files. And the cool part is, you might find yourself, if you're working with Cinema 4D, you're just starting up, constantly having to rename files. And by creating tokens, you can, and adding a date and a time to these files, you can make sure that a separate set gets added without having to overwrite your existing file or rename it at all. So what I want you to know here is that this $ PRJ refers to the Cinema 4D project, and this $ year refers to the year, the day, and this refers to the month. These specific tags, I had to download something in addition to get the basically preset tags. And there's a resource called Cineversity, which is included if you have a full version of Cinema 4D. And with that, there is a CV toolbox. And in that toolbox has all of these presets where you can add tokens to your file names. And I find that this is so important, especially if you're going to do multiple render passes, to keep yourself sane so that your individual, let's say, EXR files or PNG files don't just get added all together in one folder. They actually save to separate folders. So let me add a few things here, first of all, to the multipass, and then we'll take a look at the second set of savings for our multipass image. So under multipass, this is what I'm going to choose. I'm going to, first of all, right-click, and let's, at the top here, add an object buffer. This is assigned to group ID number 1, you can see here. And correct me, I believe this is my large fracture. I'll just call that large. And I'm just going to right click again, add another object buffer, but make sure that it is assigned to the group ID number 2. So there's my object buffer passes. To get the luminance material right from the Voronoi fracture, I'm going to come down here to material and choose luminance. So if I didn't do anything here in the save settings of the multipass image, like add these tokens, picture like having an object buffer 1 followed by the object buffer 2 followed by the material luminance, all within the folder that you've chosen to, without separation, and then all within an image sequence. And by what I did here was created a project folder, right? Which then a subfolder using tokens for each of the individual passes. So this $pass creates a folder for my object buffer large. It then creates a folder for the object buffer just named object buffer, which is my 2, and then one from the material luminance. And why this is exciting is it keeps everything within those contained folders. And it's just, Chad, I got to say, it's just awesome in terms of organization when you're doing these type of setups. Now,
Yes. Hey, Nick.
Yeah.
Can I interject just really quick?
Sure.
So Elizabeth had a question about the token tool. I think I found it on Cineversity, and so I'm just going to go ahead and paste that into the link. I think you have to be logged in order to use it, but I think that I just sent that out. If I'm using my software correctly, I think I just sent out the CV tokens link to everybody in the as a question. And also, I wanted to point out really quick, my favorite workflow with this multipass deal that I actually learned from a webinar in April. Somebody made a comment and saved me, that if you are saving the project file, which I realize you haven't got to, I'm kind of jumping the gun, but if you're, then you can't save the multi-layer file as an OpenEXR. Like you see that option under multipass image, it says multi-layer file, and it's grayed out. If you're saving a compositing project file, then you can't save a multi-layer EXR. But if you aren't saving the compositing file, then you can save the multi-layer file, and so all of your render passes can be in one EXR, one OpenEXR file. So your OpenEXR file can contain luminance, object buffers, reflections, everything in one single file, which is amazing. And then you can use the extractor effect in After Effects to pull out that data, and like that is a huge lifesaver for me.
Yeah, I'm not covering extractor here, but I'll definitely show the extractor plugin in After Effects that gives you access to this information when you are saving that OpenEXR file without the regular image. And I just wanted to show also like how this token system worked, Chad. So I'm just going to head to my desktop where I've pre-saved some of this stuff so that you don't have to go through the entire process of this rendering out. But I'm here in my compositing week, and this is the folder I targeted. You can kind of see how this is named just as a comparison, but here's the baked movie. And those are all my files listed here. And if I expand on them, you can see this particular pass, I just saved the date, not like the date of the month. And here's the renders, and this is what I love. So if you look at the folder structure, renders, projects, and then here are the 3 separate passes of EXRs.
Oh, that's great.
Just because of a token. Yeah, awesome. And then if you're looking again to like make sure that you don't have to go in here and fill this out every single time, like go back to the render settings menu, you can use a file save incremental like in After Effects, Command Alt S. It's going to add or append a number to it, and then it's going to save a new set of files in each of those folders, like ready for you to go. On top of that is this compositing project file settings, and this is what's going to save to your target application of After Effects, your AEC file. And in that AEC file will contain my baked OpenEXR, right? And then it will contain also all of the special passes which I'm doing, which are the 2 object buffers and the material luminance. So we're going to fast forward now where I'll just show now that that's set up, to render this out, I would just simply go over here to my picture viewer, and this is going to now start to save those files out one by one. And in the picture viewer, by the way, if you want to sort of go and see the separate passes being rendered just to make sure everything's right, go to the layer tab, and let's look at single pass, and then you can kind of click on the separate passes. Pretty cool. So without further ado, we'll fast forward to this being done. So I'm just going to kind of stop my render process, and I'm just going to temporarily close down Cinema 4D, and let's head back into After Effects. Cool. Here is how the AEC file appeared to me when I opened it. Okay, so I double click the AEC file. It opens up in After Effects as an After Effects project, and you get your composition matching the settings that you chose for your Cinema 4D project, which happens to be 1920 by 1080. And this takes all of the individual EXRs and places them into an image sequence. So here's my egg pass, and here's that EXR file. You can see the break. Awesome. I then have a separate folder up here inside my project panel, including the 3 separate passes. This was done earlier, so it wasn't using the same folder structure, but you can keep in mind here is my luminance pass, material luminance, and then the 2 objects, so the 2 separate objects representing different forms of a fracture. So how could this now be useful? Let me actually just bring in here, and let's just say that we wanted to just add glow and have no differentiation between the 2 glows that are in the scene. So just notice I turned off my background layer, and you can see here, this is the actual glow. And funny enough, Chad, which I think is awesome, for doing or working with Optical Glow, I might not have to do that much extra because there's options for compositing inside the Optical Glow plugin.
I love it.
Here I have this pass ready to go, and I'm going to go to the window menu, and like we've done before, wait, that's not the window menu. We want to go to the effect menu, and under effect menu, here's RG VFX Suite. And from that, I will choose my Optical Glow. And you can see the glow is already applied to the material luminance. But however, unfortunately, I'm not seeing the image that's behind. I just turned it back on to verify that. Rather than choose a mode from here, or even use this EXR and do a track matte workflow, you can come down here to Alpha Channel and choose from a few unmult options like Extend or Generate. And you can see there that it generated an alpha channel based on the black material for us. And now we have this kind of awesome glow, right? Just off the bat. Now, VFX Suite was recently updated to 1.5, and Optical Glow is available in both SuperComp and just as a standalone effect. Some of the cool new additions just with this plugin, besides choosing, this is not a new addition, but you can actually choose the type of footage you're working with. And then you can also take the size of your glow and separate it into X and Y. On top of that, we've got some additional controls for, the size by channel if you wanted to separate your glow into red, green, and blue. Not to mention, I think one of my favorites effects, let me just sort of bring this down now, which is the radiate control. So if I bring up the percentage slider here, you can sort of see a nice little radiate effects occur. Way too much, but it demonstrates the point. Along with your ability to kind of take that and change the position for where those lights radiate. So this doesn't, as you can see, Chad, this isn't giving me separate control of, as you'll notice, each of the different material luminance, and that's where the object buffer came into play. So I'm just going to fast forward and sort of show how this was created by, let's take a look at one of the compositions that I have here, which is my buffer inner glow. So this is how it was set up. In fact, let me just choose no track matte so you can see it. here is my material luminance pass, right? And this contains both of the two luminance channels, and I just took the object buffer. That's how it looks, right? So you can sort of see the egg pass. I then just took this and went to the track matte category and literally just set this up as a lumen matte, looking at the above object buffer pass. And that's how I was able to separate this to be the, as you can see, the smaller egg. And if I go to the egg pass, I then place those two items into a pre-composition, moving everything inside, where we can see that I was able to then apply a separate glow to the second material on the Voronoi fracture object. I did a few things here in terms of just being able to, as we move forward to sort of see the egg, animates the actual glow. Like when I think glows or just lights in general in After Effects, I always want to wiggle them, Chad, or just have a little bit of light variation, or sometimes use a random effects. And that's exactly what I did here, was just use a simple wiggle expression to have this blink quite a bit. And then more towards the end, bring down the high intensity effect. And then I repeated this step for the buffer outer egg glow. So if I solo this, it was the same method if we hopped inside the pre-composition, right? This is your material luminance, and this is the object buffer 2 that I used.
What does the object buffer look like by itself?
This second object buffer, this is what this one looks like. That's the large egg, okay?
Awesome.
I had to do a further separation because you'll notice here, Chad, there's a bit of overlap between the two eggs. So I did add an additional mask to get a clear luminance material pass on those two overlapped images. So heading back to the egg pass, we can see on this one, if we turn off the actual material and head back here, you should see this update. And there's my system thinking about it. There we go. And you can sort of see the optical glow that was added. In this case, the same thing. It's just a lighter wiggle expression that was added to the amount. I introduced a little bit of vibrance here, as well as I took advantage of the radiate and changing the Y position to get that optical glow. And I was able to do separate passes on both of these. I should mention one other item, which is I just added a solid, actually 2 separate items. I actually added a solid layer to this comp. And while not looking, this was actually used from Red Giant Universe. And if you've seen any of my earlier kind of webinars, I'm just a big fan of Universe Texturize. I love grunge patterns. And I just took a grunge pattern here, added it to the solid, and chose from like a series of texture presets, concrete holes that you can see here. And what's kind of cool about Universe Texturize is the fact that it masks out automatically the center of the image, which is usually where you're drawing focus to in a lot of cases.
That's great. Anyhow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, I freaking love Universe Texturize, and the fact that there's this enable mask, I just love it.
That's amazing.
On top of that, by making this solid 3D, because this is an AEC file, right? I don't know what happened there, but that was interesting. So let me just undo some steps so I can hopefully see this in its full glory. And if not, all right, I'm at the will of my system. Anyhow, by making this 3D, because this is an AEC file, right, it actually includes the camera, the visible side data or information, which is awesome. So this also lights that texture, not looking so good at this particular moment, the exact same that my entire other scene is, as you can see, has been lit, right? Because it has the lights that were from Cinema 4D inside your After Effects project. So that's pretty sweet. No extra work needed because we're using an AEC file. And while, I mean, I've added quite a few effects, I will say that just working with the EXR, it was very responsive if we go in and just sort of see without the luminance pass, just the EXR by itself, playing back this file before adding those effects, which I just love. One more thing to cover with the egg pass. I know that we're getting close to time and want to make sure that we have some time for some questions or some back and forth dialogue. And that is, I added an effect in a way that is really not typical, Chad, kind of closer here to the end that I wanted to mention. And that's on the inner egg glow. What I did was let's just see if we can see it. It might be too low in this instance. Okay. What I did, let me see if I can bring this up. I might just have to have the background going. I actually added a version of VFX reflection, which we'll see in another next week. But I just made it super large in scale, right? And it's reflecting this actual egg here. This creates, by the way, awesome reflections, and some of the additions, like such as displacement maps, really bring out your ability to make reflections here. But this might be clear to see what I started with if I solo this. And let me just add a clean version of it so you can sort of see how it starts. Creates a reflection right away. And as long as my view options are on, you get this little T-bar where you can align where that reflection appears. And with the GPU acceleration, this makes it super fast for compositing. Anyhow, in this particular example, I didn't use it in a standard way. I offset the reflection from the T-bar, as you can see here, and I scaled it up quite a bit and placed it in the corner so that there was this like subtle kind of same effect happening to add almost a little bit of light to the scene. So it kind of looks like an After Effects light, but it was simply by using the reflection. If I just rewind a few steps forward, it wasn't as strong. But it was kind of a cool, like, different use of VFX reflection, to apply to a light source. So I kind of like that.
That is awesome.
And that's kind of what I wanted to show with the AEC workflow and the multi-pass images that we saw, and then comparing it to the Cineware workflow that you did, Chad.
Awesome, man. I'm gonna cut in line from ahead of everyone else, and I'm going to make a comment and ask a question. I'm curious about. I noticed that like you pre-compose a lot of stuff, like the buffer with the like egg stuff. Like, was that is that like part of your workflow? Do you find that because I find like I pre-compose, like if After Effects puts a gun to my head, then I will pre-compose. Otherwise, no, screw it. I will not pre-compose under any circumstances. But like I know that like a lot of people are different, so I'm curious. Like it seems like in those instances you don't have to. You didn't have to pre-compose, but some people just have that workflow where they just kind of pre-compose more. So I'm curious like where you fall on that.
Great question. I think I would be one more to pre-compose.
Okay.
It's more for the way that my brain works, Chad, is that when I see a lot of layers, I just tend to go a little bit wonky. So seeing inside a composition like just a few is a lot easier for me to understand what's going on. And then if I need to go into a specific container and see what's going on, it's a lot easier for me to see like 3 or 4 different layers. In some cases, it is, because I have to, like you've mentioned, where you have to reverse the order of operations inside of After Effects. So I would also say that it's a knowledge thing from like way back in the day. Like pre-composing was much more of a thing.
Yes.
Until modern day workflows have introduced additional possibilities which don't require you to pre-compose. So for my own learning of After Effects, pre-composing was kind of one of those first things that you would go to.
Yes.
Let's say via 7 years ago, where you don't have to do it as much. So there is that too. So it's a 2-part equation, but yeah, that's the best way to describe it. But for like organization purposes, that's one purpose. And combining that, which I've seen you use in a lot of your work too, shy layers.
Yes.
If you
yes,
have
I
to, if you
use
have like
shy
a really
layers
large,
like a beast.
Oh, it's just so great to you know, pull focus on those things, or making a layer shy in After Effects so you don't have to see everything there. So yeah.
Yes, that's the
Um,
trade-off, is that I use shy layers like a champ. But like I feel like I don't know, like I yeah, I've been using After Effects for like quite some time. I think like I started on 4.1. So I've been using it for about 20 years. And so like I was used to like doing pre-comps as well, but I hate it because it's like almost like this like mystery. Like I don't know what's going on in that pre-comp. I don't know the layers. I don't know how it's going to affect the parent comp. And so if I have everything exposed, yes, it's messy, but then at least I can see what's going on and there aren't these like potential snags where I have to go in and do a bunch of like detective work and um, all that kind of stuff.
yeah, I mean, there's definitely kind of, I think, something to be said, because like when you keep on diving into pre-comps, and then there's also like pre-comp management, you know, like in terms of being careful of how you duplicate things, you know,
Yes. Yeah.
meaning that you like, if you want a true independent version, you've got to duplicate your pre-comp in your project panel versus like duplicate it inside the composition window. So I think there's something there, and it took me a while to get used to this, but this is what I kind of use to keep my head sane if you do use a lot of pre-comps. And
Yes.
that is like, you know, the flow chart here.
Yeah.
And I think,
Use
you know,
the tab key.
the little
That's like
tab key,
the
it's kind of
saving
awesome.
grace. Yeah.
Little
With
bring
the
it up and
arrows.
just sort of see your flow or someone else's flow is awesome. And I think
Mm-hmm.
the other piece of the puzzle, at least with modern day pre-comps, I mean, even they're better when you introduce the master, I'm drawing a blank here, the Master Effects, not Master Effects. It's done through the um the what's the panel called here? It's not Master Graphics, but it's like literally like a Master Effect thing. I'm forgetting the name, but I will provide a link because I have a memory flop here inside the actual GoToWebinar, so you have some, you know, master properties. Thank you, Kent. He saved me.
Oh,
So yeah,
gotcha.
master properties and like being able to use pre-comps and stuff like that. Awesome. And thank you. You know, you deserve a reward for understanding what I was talking about there. So that's awesome. And then I
Yeah, the
was
new
also
religion
trying
that
to
we're
say,
starting for Darren, like Kent can be like co-deity with
yeah. Um, there was actually a great comment here in the thread I was just looking at specifically regarding um, crypto match. Just sort of bringing this back. And if you're able to render crypto mats with Cinema 4D's native renderer, I saw a presentation on this recently, Chad, and I don't think that is available. The crypto mats are specific with
Redshift, right?
Redshift
Yeah.
as of now. There might be someone here from Cinema 4D who could tune into that a little bit more, but that's from my understanding that it is a Redshift thing using crypto mats specifically for Cinema 4D workflows.
Awesome. I also wanted to make a quick comment that the AEC workflow, like bringing in the AEC, because like I think your After Effects project was already open, correct?
Sorry, can you
When
say the comment again?
I think that your After Effects project was already open with the AEC inside of it, right?
Correct. So if we look at the disclosure triangle here, we have a folder with it's now organized with all of my comps, but I actually got a composition specifically with the file, like the composition with the actual this file inside of it when I opened up, just the one
Yes.
by itself.
And I was
So
just
yeah,
going to
that came in.
mention, oh yeah, go ahead.
Nope, that just came in by itself, and I was able to preview that. And I think the other kind of cool thing was when you open the AEC file, it like matches your linear space inside of Cinema 4D, right? As well as the sRGB workspace, which is super cool. So you don't have to worry about like actually opening up an After Effects project and then tweaking that,
Oh,
if
I
that
didn't know
makes
that.
sense.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I was just also going to mention really quick that like the AEC workflow now, and this is another reason why it feels like they're really shoving people into Cineware, is because like the AEC workflow is not like set up by default. So I was kind of frustrated like a little while back. I brought in an AEC file and it's like didn't work in After Effects, and then I realized I did some Googling and realized that like you had to actually go into the Cinema 4D files. There's a folder called Exchange plugins, and you have to find the Exchange plugin version for, it's like an After Effects plugin for your version of After Effects, and then put that in the plugins in After Effects in order for After Effects to be able to read the AEC file. So
I'm so glad you mentioned this, because when I did this the first time, it took me forever to kind of figure out like where to place that AEC file. That's like such
yeah,
a
right.
great pointer there, Chad. Yeah.
And then once you get used to using it, like you just forget that that you had to set it up. Like I do anyways. I forget that like I had to go in and actually do it. So yeah, it's like not the default workflow. So I think that's kind of like one of the reasons why I'm glad that we kind of championed it here, that you covered it and talked about its benefits, because it feels like it's like slowly being deprecated maybe, or at least not as like celebrated or as automatic at least as it's been. So just be aware of that.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's also like it's going to be a great leeway into a few workflows that we'll show next week too, regarding depth
Yes.
passes and our continued journey in compositing and in After Effects, and a few other kind of cool things that we can do in Cinema 4D. So I hope to, with you, Chad, demystify a little bit about working with the depth pass and how easy and helpful that could be to even set up with just the standard renderer in Cinema 4D. And then taking that and bringing it into After Effects, and using either native tools or third-party effects. One that you recently even mentioned, the bokeh effect. I'm sorry if I'm forgetting the full name, but that's
Fast
free.
bokeh. Yeah.
Fast bokeh. But that's I digress. But that's like a little teaser for next week.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's a cool tool. I'm looking forward to like digging more into like this EXR business and your depth tricks and stuff. I'm excited.
Awesome. Well, yeah, we're almost at the top of the hour, and I just had a few things to clean up because I want to respect everyone's time. Everyone sort of still sees my screen. Just as a reminder, this continues next week, so feel free to hop down on the list to August, and you'll kind of see some of our post-render workflows. We'll be doing or talking about that depth pass, and we got some really cool things to show, using both reflections as well as VFX shadow for next week. That's awesome. Followed by some more stuff in SuperComp the week after. Should also mention in September, there's going to be a full-on new topic of weekly events that we have going on, mostly related to Cinema 4D. We're going to talk about MoGraph generators, effectors, fields, and fracturing. I kind of just read what was on the page there. But on top of that, in a few...
You did it well.
Thank you so much, Chad. Yeah. Don't forget the Maxon Volume program training, the YouTube channel. Subscribe now, and within a couple hours, you'll have our recording. And we really appreciate everyone tuning in from all over the world. It's awesome to see you, and we can't thank you enough.
Yeah, thanks for being here, everybody.
Thanks, everybody, for all the comments. Really nice. And we're excited to see you guys next week.
Yeah, awesome. Take care, everybody. See you, Nick.
Bye, Chad. Talk to you soon.
See you.